Lastly, to my friend Charlie Kirk, rest now, brother. We have the watch, and I'll see you in Valhalla.
It really helps now that I could text the FBI director. That is very helpful. And it's a lot different. It's a lot different. Hey, Kash, here's a social media post. They say they want to murder me. On it.
So it looks like Kash Patel might not have been telling the full truth about what was happening behind the scenes with Charlie, because new receipts just popped up showing how Charlie was allegedly reaching out for help for weeks before he died. But somehow he was let down at every stage, until unfortunately things took a dark turn. If y'all have been following the Charlie situation for a while, then you've probably already heard the reports about how he was scared for his life in those final weeks. And that's saying a lot, because if he knew there were credible threats against him and he was sending messages, making calls, and begging all his powerful friends to help, then how come nobody took it seriously until he ended up being assassinated in broad daylight? And this is where it gets really uncomfortable. As you guys probably know, Kash has repeatedly presented himself as someone who was close to Charlie and aware of what was going on. So it's got people wondering, did Kash just not care? Or did he also get orders from above not to do anything? Because the more information that comes out, the harder it becomes to understand how Charlie could be left hung out to dry while his friend did nothing.
If the FBI and the authorities in Utah end this investigation by declaring Tyler Robinson a lone gunman with no accomplices whatsoever, without having done, a truly exhaustive investigation, sort of like the one they did into January 6th.
Right.
That will not be adequate.
Now, the reason people are suddenly questioning Kash Patel's role in all this goes back to a clip that recently started making the rounds online again. The clip came from an interview Charlie Kirk did not long before he died. One part that really jumped out during the interview was where Charlie openly admitted that he had been receiving multiple death threats from people online. Now, that alone didn't shock many people. As you guys probably know, Charlie was one of the most polarizing political figures on the internet, so hearing that he was receiving threats wasn't exactly the surprising part. What caught people's attention was what Charlie said next, because Charlie revealed that some of those threats were serious enough that he personally brought them to Kash Patel. And this isn't like some random tip being sent into a government office. Charlie and Kash had a personal relationship, which meant Charlie had a direct line to the FBI director himself. However, according to Charlie, after bringing the threats to Kash, the response he received was just, on it. That was it. And you can hear it for yourself here.
It really helps now that I could text the FBI director. That is very helpful. And it's a lot different. It's a lot different. Hey, Kash, here's a social media post. They say they want to murder me. On it.
So cool.
It's a lot to... Elections matter, everybody. Elections matter a lot.
Matter.
And again, it's nothing improper. It's me just sending him little death threats.
And looking back now, the response is hitting a lot differently. Because if your friend is telling you they're receiving threats serious enough to report directly to the FBI director, people naturally expect a little more urgency than 2 words. And the deeper people dug into what Charlie was saying in those final interviews, the more uncomfortable the whole thing became. Because this wasn't the only sign that Charlie may have been asking for help. Now, to understand why that old interview suddenly sparked so much outrage, you have to understand that for a lot of people, this wasn't simply a story about an FBI director allegedly failing to take threats seriously. See, after Charlie died, Kash Patel publicly paid tribute to him on social media, describing him as his friend and brother. In the message he posted on X, he said, "Rest in peace, my friend, conservative titan Charlie Kirk. I am praying for Charlie and his family." During a later press conference announcing that the suspect in Charlie's shooting had been detained, Kash once again made the relationship sound deeply personal. Near the end of his remarks, he referred to Charlie as his brother before closing with, "We have the watch, and I'll see you in Valhalla."
Lastly, to my friend Charlie Kirk, rest now, brother. We have the watch, and I'll see you in Valhalla.
At the time, many people saw all this as heartfelt, but once that interview resurfaced, some viewers started looking at it differently. Because on one hand, they had Charlie talking about serious threats that he felt were important enough to bring directly to Kash's attention. On the other hand, they had Kash publicly mourning the loss of someone he repeatedly described as a close friend. And for a lot of people, those two things weren't fitting together. They started asking why all of this emotion seemed to be showing up after the fact. Because if Charlie truly was a friend, if he truly was a brother, then why are people now finding clips of Charlie talking about threats that he apparently felt were serious enough to report directly to him? Why did he never take them seriously? Because as we're about to find out, Charlie was actually dealing with a lot of stress behind the scenes. Stuff much more serious than just online threats. But this is where the story starts getting a lot more emotional. While people were already questioning whether Charlie's warnings were taken seriously, leaked text messages later surfaced that seemed to show he was dealing with much more pressure behind the scenes than most people realized. During an episode of her podcast, Charlie's close friend, Candace Owens, revealed he had been facing intense pressure from powerful figures before he died. To back this up, she shared text messages that she said came directly from Charlie. One of those messages read, "Just lost another huge Jewish donor. $2 million a year because we won't cancel Tucker. I'm thinking of inviting Candace." Then he followed up with another text that read, "Jewish donors play into all the stereotypes. I cannot and will not be bullied like this, leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause." Now, there's obviously a lot being discussed in those messages, but the specific part Candace kept focusing on was Charlie saying he felt bullied and that he believed he was being pushed into a corner. And according to Candace, those texts showed Charlie was becoming increasingly worried about his personal safety and was privately expressing those fears to people he trusted. And if that's true, it changes how many people view those earlier clips where Charlie talked about receiving threats. Because suddenly, it doesn't sound like someone casually mentioning internet trolls. It sounds like someone who genuinely believed he was facing a growing problem and was actively trying to find protection before things got worse. And this is exactly why there was so much backlash when investigators announced that Tyler Robinson was the suspect, arrested and charged in connection with the crime. But the controversy wasn't just about whether Tyler Robinson was the person who pulled the trigger. The issue was whether investigators had fully explored every other part of Charlie's life before settling on a conclusion. If you remember, once authorities identified Tyler as the primary suspect, they moved on really quickly and shut down the investigation. Because when they looked back at Charlie's interviews, the threats he discussed, and the claims from friends that he had been expressing fears before his death, they felt like there were still unanswered questions. And it didn't take long for people to start making those questions public. One person wrote, "How sad is this? He had the FBI director's personal phone number, yet he was murdered in broad daylight. Elections have consequences." Some reactions went even further, like this person who said, "Sadly, Kash Patel works for the very same people who got Charlie murdered." Comments like that gained traction because emotions were running incredibly high, and that's why Kash Patel's name kept coming up in the conversation. Because for a growing number of people, this was no longer just a story about a tragic death. It was becoming a story about warnings that people believe should have received far more attention than they did. But here's where the conversation takes another turn. Because at this point, some people have started asking whether the controversy surrounding Kash Patel is really just about being nonchalant towards his friend Charlie, or whether there's a bigger reason certain questions never seem to get answered. And those concerns got louder when the former director of the National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent, resigned over conflict surrounding the Iran war. As you might recall, Charlie also strongly opposed conflict with Iran, and the fact that top intelligence officers in the country were resigning over it already raised red flags. But it was what Joe Kent said about Charlie's murder that made people pause. Because in an interview with Tucker Carlson, he claimed he was directly ordered to stop digging into anything connected to Charlie's death.
I don't think we really even got very far. And so I can't say that, like, hey, there's this one thing that I think is hotter of a lead than another lead. We had a decent amount of leads because there was a big crowd there that day. Charlie had an international following, right? So we were just at the very beginning of doing basic investigatory work on foreign leads. So I can't even tell you on or off the record, like, hey, this one thing. There's a couple specific things that I would, if I were put back on the case, I would start looking at immediately because I think they require attention that I can't get into. But just doing the basic, I would say, curious investigator work 101, we didn't get started on that.
According to Kent, he didn't just have random questions about the murder. He had actual leads he wanted to pursue because he believed there were details surrounding the case that hadn't been properly examined. But every time he tried to follow those leads, he said he was completely shut down. They straight up told him that not only could he not follow the leads, but he also couldn't discuss them openly at all.
It's incredibly frustrating that there's not more, especially considering how pivotal Charlie was to the MAGA movement and to President Trump, that there hasn't been a more concerted effort to find the truth and to find justice.
And all of this made people wonder if the FBI was actually hiding something to protect the people actually responsible for Charlie's death. Because the way they see it, there's no reason why the FBI would shut down the investigation before following all leads. And the longer those questions remain unanswered, the more people wonder whether there's another part of this story that nobody's been able to see yet. Because if the investigation really ended where everyone says it did, why are so many people still insisting there are loose ends left behind?